Okay, so again, hello everyone for joining us in this first session of the annual conference. So my name is Alice Yu. I am the head of advocacy and outreach at the IRF, and I'm very delighted to welcome you to our session on roads as enabler for equitable access and mobility for all. So this is a session that focuses on a very simple but a very profound truth, which is that roads are not just conduits for vehicles but that they are the lifelines for people. I think this is the concept that we have just heard repeatedly from our panelists and also special speakers from UNECE, from the World Bank, from a tech company called Umofity, and also for government administrations association from PIOC. They're all sharing these very similar concepts of that roads need to be reimagined. They are not just infrastructure, but they're the lifelines for people, and they shape whether people can reach schools, hospitals, jobs, markets, opportunities, you name it. And when they're designed in an equitable manner, they reduce exclusion. And when they're not, they reinforce it. So today's conversation examines what it means to design, to build, and to manage road systems that serve everyone, from women to children, to persons with disabilities, to rural communities, to populations who have historically been left behind. And this is why we brought together four leaders and our moderator who will be sharing their approaches and insights from very different but very complementary angles, from walking and cycling to rural connectivity and infrastructure, and for safety for vulnerable users as well. So I'm very pleased to introduce our moderators for today's discussion, who is Ms. Awa Sar. She is the president of LASAR International. And on the panel, we have Mr. Rudy Herrera. He is the director for the Roots for Development Program from the Private Secretariat of the Presidency of Guatemala. We also have Ms. Abby Noriega. She is the Global Advocacy and Partnership Director from Bridges to Prosperity. And we also have Ms. Bronwyn Thornton, CEO from Walk 21. And I have to check with my colleagues here, Jennifer, whether Mr. Akelish is here with us today. Jennifer? And I think, sorry, I think Akelish might be coming in late or joining us later, but I'll keep an eye out if he joins us. But anyways, in any case, I would love to turn the floor to you, Awa. Thank you for in advance for moderating our discussion. Awa, the floor is
My
yours.
pleasure. Okay, thank you very much, Alice, and warm thanks to the International Road Federation for setting up such a powerful stage for this conversation. And good afternoon to all colleagues that are joining from all around the world. My name is Awasa. I'm president of LASAR International, as Alice just said, a civil society organization working across Africa and beyond to place human life, vulnerable road users, and inclusion at the center of road policies. Today's discussion is not only about infrastructure, but it is about dignity, opportunity, and justice. Because a road that excludes is not truly a road to development. Let us move directly into our first round of reflections with four distinguished voices who represent policy, global advocacy, engineering leadership, and active mobility. Can I go ahead, Alice? Okay.
Yes, definitely. And sorry, I just raised a note because I did mention Achilles. I just received an information that he has to attend a family emergency. So apologies sending from him. But also we wish that things will be okay for him. But thank you very much, Awa, for adapting the situation and for conducting our discussion. Please go ahead.
Okay. So sorry for him. So sorry. Okay. So I'm going to introduce from Miss Thornton. Okay. We often say that walking is the most basic form of mobility, and yet in too many countries, it is the most neglected. To open our panel, so Mrs. Thornton is CEO of Walk 21, a global leader in promoting walking as a fundamental human right. So Mrs. Thornton, the floor is yours.
Hello. Yes. Thanks so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. It's we've had a long-running partnership with IRF over these years, and it's really great to be talking into a roads context about my favorite subject, which is walking, but I will also touch on cycling as well through the work we do through the Partnership for Active Travel and Health. If I could have the next slide, please.
Okay.
So
So the first question, I guess your slides are going to answer it. As long championed walking as a basic human right, why is pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure still so underevaluated in national road planning, and how can that change? Please go ahead.
yeah, thanks very much. It is a challenge, and understandably at the national level, and unsurprisingly, the focus is very often on larger scale national issues, which translate into intercity connections, major infrastructure projects, and longer distance movement. And alongside the motorization of that movement, the private motorization of movement has warped our perception of how people travel and how they want to travel, both locally and over longer distances. We have valued longer distance movement over shorter distance travel, but in reality, long distance movement is only between 10 and 30% of all the movement, all the travel that we do as people. I'm not referencing freight here, just to with regard to my the needs of freight. So long distance travel, of all human trips, long distance is only a short percentage of trips. But these primary road networks are critical connectors between our communities. And as you can see in the illustration that I've shared, very often the design of this infrastructure is monomodal. That is, these are designed for motorized movement only. There's very little space for anybody else to use to share the transport corridor. So we have a position where the mobility corridor has become a motorized mobility corridor, and walking and cycling are squeezed into the margins, as you can see here. And when these primary road networks come into cities, they retain this sort of sense of their importance and their priority, and they sever or choke connections for local movement in between. So it's very understandable at a national level that we have this sort of scale, but we've lost sight of the value at street level about how people move, and 50% of urban trips are shorter than 5 kilometers. These are trips which can be easily walked or cycled. So this is not we need road infrastructure for these modes, but we have to imagine that road infrastructure as a different style of infrastructure. And if I could have the next slide, we can see how this is an intercity connector road as well, but it's providing for people walking and cycling on the side of this corridor. And this is in from Kigali in Rwanda. And you can see that enabling that space for people to walk and cycle not only enables them to move, but enables them to meet, to connect as people, to build community, and to be together. When we build roads, just like in the previous slide, we're building out this capacity for community. Now, not everywhere can be like that, but we must reimagine how we think about our corridors. And for example, I heard in the earlier conversation about the importance of all-weather roads, and this has been a really important thing to give people access to markets and to their communities. But what happens when we seal those roads, as happened, well-intentioned in Botswana, is we increase the speed of the motorized vehicle. And if we don't provide these safe corridors for people on either side of those higher speed sealed roads, then we have increased road safety problems. So walking and cycling have been dismissed as local modes. And so national agencies haven't seen them as their responsibility, haven't included them in their remit. But national governments have a responsibility for these modes in 3 ways. So this is where we translate this into the future. They need to national governments are responsible for translating and supporting global agendas into local action. So the SDGs, our climate ambitions, these come through national governments and ripple down through the governance to the local level. And they're also critical for negotiating funding for multilateral development banks. Then these national governments are essential for setting priorities and funding streams to deliver on those priorities and enable infrastructure like this to be built and to establish the standards and frameworks and guidance for delivery. We cannot assume that people will be in cars. We always talk about, oh, these are captive walkers, they will want to motorize, but we have also captured people into motorization as well. So whilst we have motorization, we must enable the multimodal corridor. So we need to build project appraisal systems, economic modeling, and decision-making methodologies that value multimodal corridors. They value the external impacts, the human costs of motorization and poor road design or infrastructure provision. And we must imagine roads become streets when they enter urban communities. They become local places as well as movement corridors. So we have to expand how we imagine, design, and fund our urban movement corridors and our interurban connector corridors to enable these choices and these opportunities for everybody to walk, cycle, or choose motorized modes when necessary. We can't hear you, Awa. You need the microphone.
I was on mute. You hear me now?
There we are. Yes, great.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. So thanks so much, Mrs. Thornton, for really reminding us that the most universal mode of transport is still fighting for visibility. Your message is clear. We cannot talk about equity if walking and cycling are treated as an afterthought. Thanks so much for your presentation. And I'll give the floor to Guatemala. From the global right to walk, let us now move to the realities of national investment and structural inequality. So Mr. Rudy Herrera represents the Secretariat of the Presidency of Guatemala and the ambitious Rutas del Desarrollo program covering more than 4,800 kilometers across highly unequal regions. So my question to you, Mr. Herrera, what have been the biggest challenges in aligning road investments with social inclusion goals? The floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you very much again for giving us this space here. We appreciate very much the opportunity that the IRF creates for these kinds of discussions. And I'd like to thank the panelists also for sharing their views. They seem to be very aligned, and it's a hopeful encounter in that way. So thank you very much. And regarding your question, one of the biggest challenges that we've had, I think we can separate it into three that come to mind very easily. One of the big challenges we've had is shifting the cultural views towards infrastructure in the public service. It is very, very common for us to find public servants who have been part of the public institutions and who have been working in infrastructure and come from a educational background that involves a more narrow-minded view compared to what education looks like now. And by that, I don't mean that it's necessarily bad. It's more specialized. So they specialize mainly in the technical aspects of road construction. And the way that they define success is whether the road meets the technical specs and whether they connect in the way they should, and whether the angles at which the roads are built are done properly. And so it's a very technical approach. And while that is valuable, one of the things that we have been trying to change is to remember that the road is a means to an end, and the means to an end is a user focused. And that's in the same way that it is a challenge, it is also easy to take them out of their role as a public servant who is an engineer, or who is somebody who is a budget specialist, or somebody who's trying to cut corners because the public funds need to be very efficiently spent. So it's easy because they are also users of these roads. And so when we tell them to take that into perspective, it really helps us carry the message across that the roads that we're trying to build in these programs, specifically Rutas del Desarrollo, is a program aimed towards lowering the inequalities that have been structurally imposed in our road network. So that's one of the challenges. We need to take them out of their role as a public servant that's highly specialized and put them as a user and tell them, look, you're going to be also the user. And now imagine being the user with a low income and in a rural area. How do you move? And why is the road so important to you? And so for them, it becomes very clear that the road is just how they connect to their longings. whatever they're longing for, whether it's community, whether it's a job, or whether it's a new opportunity for bringing their products to market. They can understand that very easily, and so then it becomes a bit more um, inclusive in terms of the conversation towards mobility. That's one of the aspects. The other one that I can think of is the prioritization model, something that a country that has weak institutions, as Guatemala has faced in previous administrations, is that the goal is to spend the money that's allocated towards road construction. And that is the easiest way to signal whether the government is being efficient at using public funds. And so we're trying to change the way that that is done, because what was usually done in the past was, let's spend where it is most easily spent. And by that, it means, okay, let's rebuild the roads that are the main roads. And as soon as they start finding some cracks on the road, they try to fix them again, instead of building the roads where it's most difficult, where people are most isolated, where the poorest people are living. And so sometimes the toughest roads are the roads that need to be prioritized. And so to have that conversation and to come to agreement as to what is the goal of infrastructure in terms of development, that has helped us a lot. And we, even within the public sector, even though we're part of the same government, we've also had to redefine what success looks like in terms of prioritizing. And that's just another way of recognizing that as any economy, we live in a condition that is scarcity. And scarcity requires you to prioritize, and prioritization means you have to choose where you start. And sometimes, if we do that every 4 years, you create a cycle that prioritizes always the same roads. So we need to break that cycle, and we need to remember that the previous 3 or 4 or 5 administrations, they always started with the same road and they had the same way of prioritizing. And so what we're doing now is we're trying to prioritize where the last roads were considered. So the roads that were never built, those are the ones where we're trying to build, because that's where the poorest people are. That's where the most forgotten communities have been living for several administrations. And finally, having a definition of success that is very down to earth is also one of the challenges for getting this program up and running. And I'm going to wrap it up soon. But for example, defining that the goal is to just reduce times in terms of mobility is an easy way of communicating to people that the roads need to be felt as a user in terms of time. And everybody can understand that. And even people in cities, and people in big cities, people with a lot of resources can understand that they can get frustrated when they can see their destination is only 3 kilometers away and it takes a long time to get there because of traffic. Well, in rural areas, in the most poor areas, a similar thing happens. They know that the distance is not long, but the conditions of the road are so bad and so poorly maintained that their time is too long compared to the actual distance. So understanding the concept of mobility in terms that everybody can understand is key. And that's one of the challenges that we still keep facing. We're two years almost into the administration, and all these 3 challenges we continue to face, but we know that it's part of this cultural change that we need to do.
Muchas gracias, señor Herrera. Tu programa parece maravilloso. Sí,
Gracias.
your experience shows that infrastructure is never neutral. It reflects the political choices we make about who deserves access first. And that's why I speak in Spanish. Maravilloso. Gracias, muchas gracias. Alors, so going from one language to another, it's not easy. I wanted to go back to French, but I'm going back to English, okay? So thanks so much. So we go to Abby Noriega, because from national programs, let us now turn to rigorous global evidence on rural connectivity. Mrs. Abby Noriega, Global Advocacy and Partnership, is a Chief Impact Officer at Bridges to Prosperity. She's bringing one of the strongest empirical cases for inclusive infrastructure worldwide. So, Ms. Noriega, can you tell us more about your recent randomized controlled trial and what a 30% social return on investment truly means for governments? The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. And it's so lovely to be here among people who care so deeply about transport, especially equitable transport. Feels very niche sometimes. So lovely to be among this crowd. So our organization works with government and local private sector to design, implement, resource transportation infrastructure that connects first mile communities to those broader transportation networks. And there's very little research around this, right? Part of the challenge is it's really hard to do rigorous studies around the delivery of transportation infrastructure. But we did it. As far as we know, it's the first time there's ever been an RCT that specifically randomized the delivery of transportation infrastructure, like built environment infrastructure, and we did it with bridges. And it was a massive study. I think when we first randomized the sites that went into this project, I was pregnant. That child is now in first grade, and we are still waiting on a publication. So just to kind of give you a sense of the scale and the time that went into this and what needs to happen to get research of this magnitude out the door. It's pretty incredible, but we're really excited about the results. More than 70,000 people, 500 communities across Rwanda. And it was such a huge study that we're still waiting on results to come in. But what we're actually seeing in the early findings is an ROI that's approaching 100% on an annual basis. And that's just the increase in household consumption. So that's not even attempting to quantify the benefits of better access to schools, health facilities, social networks, that sort of thing. That's pure consumption at the household level. And so I think while this tells us that bridges alone are incredibly worthwhile investments, the bigger story is really that rural transport is a worthwhile investment. You can build safe, cost-effective, and durable structures that transform mobility for rural communities, and you can do that without breaking the bank. And you can do that while serving 80% of the world's poorest people. So the most vulnerable people in the world are worth investing in. And that's really the biggest thing that came out of the study for us so far. Budgets are tight. We understand that. And I think everybody here is looking for creative ways to invest in transport infrastructure in ways that serve people in more equitable ways. And I think if we look to small works like trail bridges, one of the key pieces of our portfolio, culverts, multimodal paths. Bronwyn talked a lot about, people walking and cycling and how little we invest in that. We can unlock a road network's value at a relatively low cost, even for the entire life cycle. These types of works are not just more cost effective to build in the first place, they're much cheaper to maintain over the life of the structure itself. And I think to also speak to what Rudy was talking about with prioritization, how do we decide where to invest? I think being able to unlock that value can immediately translate to travel time saved, school enrollment, farm to market access, and really simple measures like how we normalize across the board using travel time to indicate the value of these investments. Most of our investments go to heavy vehicular transport infrastructure in urban areas, and there's a lot of logic to this, right? It makes sense to prioritize those areas because urban areas have a lot of people, but it does mean that the most vulnerable people are left behind, and it's not just a few. We're talking about probably more than 1 billion people, and some recent evidence indicates that we're probably undercounting those people by quite a lot. And not for nothing, these are the people that are growing our food, and they're doing it in an increasingly volatile climate. And so investing in safe and reliable transport access is not just a nice to have, it's an imperative at this moment in time. As we're heading into the UN Decade of Sustainable Transport, I think the timing is right to turn our attention to transport in the rural context. and also put resource and action to metrics that are easy to understand and very simple to measure year over year. As a member of IRF, and I think on behalf of those billion people, we're committed to that effort. And applying what we've learned through the RCT and other studies through our research agenda to making that happen and to joining the coalition that's here and beyond to putting actual resource towards this effort.
Thank you so much, Abby. Powerful, really powerful. Reminding us that small-scale infrastructure can deliver large-scale transformation when designed for real human needs. And that's what you just demonstrated right now. Thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, we don't have the testimony from Mr. Akhilesh Srivastava from India. I'm passionate about that, what he's doing, securing school zones for children, because really when we protect children on the road, we are not only saving lives, we are building public trust in the entire transport system. So we wish him best luck, and perhaps I will go through the second round of questions, if you don't mind. Alice, panelists, it's okay? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I would have developed Mr. Srivastava panel, but I'm not here for that. Okay, I'm just the moderator to pass the floor. Okay, so we back to Guatemala. Mr. Herrera, Rutas del Desarrollo, your program integrates technology, local participation, and indigenous knowledge. How has this co-creating process changed national level decision-making for infrastructure? The floor is yours, Mr. Herrera.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very difficult question to answer with evidence in my hand, because some of these investments are long-term, right? And so I would like to highlight first that we see these investments most of the time as something that is going to last for a very long time, and making mistakes will last for a very long time, just as being successful in delivering public satisfaction will also last for a very long time. So we see this as a process that needs to be inclusive for that reason, because if we leave someone out, we're going to leave someone out for a very long time. And if we include most people, then we're able to take into consideration populations that have not been included in the past. So the co-creation process, it goes hand in hand with an approach that is very is a big part of the identity of our current administration, which is dialogue. Ever since we got elected, even before taking office, we started rounds of dialogue with lots of indigenous and ancestral leadership. And so these representatives, they knew what were the needs that had not been met in the past in their communities. And that took a long time. And I'm going to be honest about this. I'm going to be very frank. It requires a lot of time, a lot of long meetings, but inclusion can decrease social friction. And that's the type of evidence that I can say we have seen in Guatemala. We come from a country with a very tumultuous background in terms of recent history or historical events. At the end of the last century, we had a 36-year standing civil war, and that meant that that ended in 1996. So it's relatively recent how it ended, and that means that there's a lot of people who lived through those years, and friction is very latent. So it's underneath the surface, but it's there. And so being able to deliver public goods that are going to bring communities together because they can trade, bring communities together because they can talk, bring communities together because they can go to school together, or they can move to get better job opportunities, means that we need to listen to them, because we have to understand what is it that they want. And part of this process involves talking to these indigenous leaders, but it means that we're going to be able to give the opportunity. I'm trying to be very positive here. To give the opportunity for people to complain about what is missing and to highlight those gaps. And without that knowledge, even though it's a sort of, it can be a relatively painful process because you have to sit there and just listen to how your institution is not doing its job. It's still very worthwhile because we are then able to identify what is it that hurts them the most. What are the pain points? What is it that could, if solved, bring a lot of satisfaction, a lot of collaboration. And sometimes our best allies are the communities that are able to request accountability from the construction companies, or to request accountability from their local authorities. And so having them on our side and being included means that we have somebody who collaborates towards the same goal instead of an adversary who's trying to pinpoint where we make mistakes so they can highlight it, and then they can become a opposition. So it is a big challenge, but it has changed the way in which we decide on infrastructure decisions, because needs are clearer, and that means that solutions are clearer. And I think that summarizes a little bit better what is the goal of our inclusion of dialogue in this process.
Great work, great work. Thanks so much. And this confirms that inclusion is not just about who benefits, but also who decides. And this decider like you go to people who benefit from the project, and it's applause for that. Thank you so much. Thank you to Mr. Herrera. So, Ms. Noriega, I'm back to you. And I would like to know, how can rigorous data finding from RCT or the evidence from RCT help shift the narrative so that small infrastructure like trail bridges is seen as essential rather than supplementary? The floor is yours.
Thank you. I mean, I think first, what we might think of as supplementary infrastructure really is often the only safe route for a child to get to school, for a woman to receive care for birth, or for prenatal experience, for farmers to get their crops to market before they rot. That's something that we see all the time, is seasonality in informal trail networks and paths, and farmers harvesting and then not being able to get to market within a timely manner, right? And so it feels supplementary because the works are quite small, but the impact for rural communities is massive. And so I think part of it is a mind shift in what those supplementary pieces of infrastructure are actually meaning and doing for people, right? Again, not a nice to have. It's system critical for that first mile connection. And I think it also amplifies the value of the investments that we're already making. I'm hoping that what comes out of the recent RCT in Rwanda is an understanding that these types of projects are both inexpensive and have a high and very immediate payoff, and can also then be bundled into larger corridor projects, right? And so if you're doing a lot of them all at once, you're going to have a massive impact along a corridor. A beautiful new highway that connects an agricultural hub to a port and a major city becomes a much, much smarter investment if you take even 1% of that total project cost. We're talking small amounts of money to create safe connection for all the people that live and work along that corridor. And then also make that corridor safer. Bronwyn shared that photo of a family walking along a vehicular road, and what wasn't captured in that photo is how that family got to that road in the first place. Unless they live right there, and they probably don't in all likelihood, they took informal paths or roads to get there. Maybe they walked, maybe they took a moto taxi. Those paths are probably difficult to navigate on even the best days, maybe impossible on the worst days right after it's rained. It's dangerous, and it's incredibly inefficient, and just a small additional investment would transform that. And so I think that it means demonstrating that, right? So having the data to indicate that that this is a worthwhile investment, these supplementary projects, but also making them part and parcel of any major road investment, right? We shouldn't look at them as secondary. We should look at every major investment in a road corridor as a holistic project where we want to connect everybody that lives along that corridor safely to that primary or secondary road, and have shovel-ready, easy to implement designs and solutions to do that in a really cost-effective way. And I think that there's creative financial solutions to do that, bundling many small works together, especially for local private sector. That's a great way to invest in a local economy and level up skills in rural areas, create catchment packages that are suitable for both ministry budgets and major MDB programs, or even smaller district level programs. I think another way to think about the bundling that kind of infrastructure into bigger projects is to tie it to other outcomes. We are a part of a project in Ethiopia that's incredibly creative, a World Bank funded project whose target outcome is around food security, but they're investing more than $300 million into rural access and rural transport access specifically, including $30 million into these supplementary projects, right? Trails and paths and trail bridges to connect every Kabele to those major corridor projects. And they're doing it under the umbrella of food security. And part of what we're seeing from the RCT is food security is tied very closely to safe connection. And we can think about why that is, right? People being able to consistently get to market, people being able to consistently get income and stabilize their household and village economies. And so I think that thinking about it as one big project, one big bundle is the way to shift that and stop using terms like supplementary infrastructure and start thinking about holistic connectivity.
Wow. I feel really it's a privilege to moderate such great champions. Thank you so much. Data, when well used, becomes a tool of justice. And thank you for showing it. Thank you for demonstrating it. I give the floor to Ms. Thornton to talk about global policy impacts from a global perspective. Which policies or case studies best show how walking and cycling transform inclusion? The floor is yours, our last champion of this panel.
Yeah, thanks very much. I must say it's absolutely lovely to hear this this conversation, particularly Abby, because the road that I showed from Rwanda is actually connected to a Bridges from Prosperity infrastructure build. And we were going out to see your bridge the day that I took that photograph. I was absolutely blown away by your work. And the thing that really struck me with that bridge is it was your absolute classic. It's like a shortcut, right? As kids, we all love a shortcut. You know, we all want that little sort of, and that's what you're creating with your bridges, is those shortcuts to market, but those connections. It was absolutely stunning to see it in real life. And the second thing you said about the joining up across agendas, or we've done a really big study of policies all across the Latin American region. And what we found is that policies for walking and cycling, like the need to build the infrastructure for them, is sitting across a whole raft of different government objectives. So we have to go out and meet and find those people where they are and then build outwards from there in terms of enabling better walking and cycling infrastructure in those communities. And it's one of the biggest challenges in a transport agenda that has built around large-scale projects, financial systems that don't value the externalities and impacts of their infrastructure. As we had a transport person speak at our conference once who said, "Don't ask me to deliver health. I'm a transport person. It's not in my KPIs." Well, it could be, and it should be in many ways. And perhaps in Guatemala, I actually visited very soon after the peace broke out in Guatemala. It's such a beautiful country. And, maybe peace is something we could imagine as part of the importance of connection that we build into our communities. I have got a couple of slides that I would like to share again. I'm really big on the pictures today, but I wanted to share an image from the work that we did in Medellin, Colombia. Like, how does this impact? And we were going to hear about child journey to school from India, but these gorgeous children didn't have mobile phones, and even if they did, they didn't want to take them out in this neighborhood in Medellin, Colombia, because they didn't feel sort of secure or safe to use that. They went around and identified all the spaces in their neighborhood where they didn't like the infrastructure, where they did like it, or where they were uncertain about it. And this was the beginning of what we've developed, which is our walkability app. And it enabled these children to communicate to their local authority how they felt moving around in their neighborhood. And we don't value their journey, right? And again, this is that question about how we value, because better road infrastructure, if we can go to the next picture, you can see here in the picture on the left, you can see these people walking in a small group with a footpath. This footpath didn't exist before this project. What the existence of this footpath means, and this comes back to the question about access and inclusion. This footpath means, and the connecting crossings and pathways through a park means that these children can now walk to school on their own or with their parents and carers if they want to. But it's not essential because they've created a safe space for these children to make this journey. And we've used the app in both for children, for women accessing trams in Dublin, and for people accessing a bus station in Lagos in Nigeria, where they built a beautiful bus station, but no proper access for customers to reach that bus service. And even in a low density urban environment like Washington, D.C., they identified that increasing walkable access to their public transport was the best way to increase their ridership. But not only did improving walking increase the ridership on the service, it reduced what they call their paratransit costs. So they were spending a lot of money to bring people with disabilities or mobility challenges to their public transport stations with private taxis. By building good, safe, clean, accessible walking infrastructure, people could access the public transport on their own. And that's what's happening in this other picture. Is you see Leah here in Portugal assessing the environment around her public transport station in Lisbon. And they're doing this across the city of Lisbon to ensure that the streets are safe and accessible for everybody, the elderly, the young, people with disabilities. But we've got to remember that women, children, the elderly, people with disabilities, this is not an elite minority that we're sort of making a special effort for. This is actually the majority of people in our communities. And it's very easy to think, well, how do we put an economic value on these journeys so that we can lift it up into the appraisal systems that are informing the decision making? And we have to think beyond the transport values that have traditionally informed appraisal systems and look at what are the impacts, what are the cost on these people in terms of the air pollution, the lack of activity, the time of the people who need to accompany you on the journey. These are economic factors we could build into our transport appraisal systems and make these dimensions part of the KPIs that transport agencies can respond to. But the whole of government linking to ensure that all of the government agendas are being connected and delivered through the way that we build our transport systems. And the last thing I wanted to mention is one of the ways that we're trying to help do that through the work we're doing at Walk 21 is with the Partnership for Active Travel and Health, which is a global alliance supported by the FIA Foundation and working with cycling and UN Environment around the world to look at how we enable governments to think at a national level about their policies. And the active travel template helps them identify the necessary actions and leverages and inspirational case studies to support the translation of that ambition down to street level so that all of these people, children can walk to school. Road safety is the number one reason parents don't let them. Personal security is the number two reason. But if we address road safety with good infrastructure, then we invite more people to be in the space, which then addresses the personal security factor as well. So walking and, this infrastructure is part of how we can be as humans and support that foundation mode. I'm going to stop there because I realize I've got too much to say, but I just wanted to share this is the reality on the ground for people, and this is what we can do to support them.
Thank you for your passion for road designs and proving with your partners that design choices directly shape social outcomes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I would like to invite the three panelists in one sentence, just for your final message. What final message would you give to road agencies and engineers about embedding inclusion in every meter of road they design? Just 30 seconds for each of you. You can start. Miss Thornton.
Okay, great. I think it's very clear from what I've said already. We have to think about our roads as multimodal corridors. They're movements for everybody, not just for motorized vehicles. We have to therefore build them, whether it's with shortcuts and side pieces. And we have to imagine our decision-making frameworks have to accommodate the external impacts and issues associated with that as well. So the breadth of benefits and impacts, as well as the breadth of road users. And particularly in urban environments, we must prioritize local movement for everybody that needs to access their community.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. We pass the floor to Abby.
I'd love to plus one what Bronwyn said, and I think also I think I would impress that making transport equitable, whether it is in urban areas or rural areas, is not too expensive and it's not too difficult. That's really, really important, I think, to kind of shifting our mindset from equitable transport being a nice to have or some sort of aspirational goal to something that's integral is understanding that it is within our reach. And it's not that hard. We just need to build in the muscle memory. And I think a big part of that is also being able to set thresholds and measures of success that are simple and easy, and indicate how things would change for everybody. I think travel time has been talked about a lot in the chat, in the conversation today, and I think that that's a big piece of it. So we need to, as I think a community and a sector, rally around measures that that we can actually pay attention to and set together as a community.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much. Mr. Herrera, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I can also I support what has been said before. I couldn't agree more. And I would add that coming from a standpoint of a worker that's within the institutions, I think I've come to learn very clearly, or to reinforce this learning aspect of it, which is systemic long-term challenges require systemic long-term solutions, and that means that the road is long in trying to get these to overcome these challenges, but they are worthwhile. The effort and the need to include everybody, the need to think that every time we're thinking of one piece of infrastructure or one site, and we're putting a long-term piece of a long-term puzzle into solving what is the vision of the country we want to build, or the community we want to build. So I think it can be overwhelming if you think it that way, but also it can be very satisfactory if we think that whatever we're doing now can be a solution for generations to come. So systemic problems require systemic solutions. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much. A big applause to these champions. And you showed three of you, and Alice, the fourth of you, that today's discussions shows us something fundamental. Roads are not merely technical assets. They are social instruments, and they can either reinforce inequality or actively dismantle it. From rural bridges to safe school zones, but we didn't have the last one, unfortunately. From walking policies to national road programs, one message is consistent. Inclusion does not happen by accident. It must be designed. On behalf of Lazaro International, And as an African civil society voice, I strongly reaffirm that road safety, accessibility, and equity must advance together, especially for women, children, persons with disabilities, and rural populations. And thanks for following me, and thanks for being in this panel. And I now hand the floor back to the session facilitator for the wrap-up. Thank you for to your outstanding panelists and to all participants worldwide. Thank you so much. Alice, the floor is yours.
I have learned so much. I just, if I could clap, but I'm alone in my room. But I really, really appreciate this conversation. I mean, I have listened in with so much intent, and I'm sure our audience really appreciate these insights as well. I saw some questions in the chat box. I feel like we have addressed them one way or another in the discussion as well, regarding how to better prioritize walking and cycling, how to get the politicians involved, how to make roads more equitable that serves all road users. How do we make sure that people get out of their comfort zones? And so it's a big, I think a lesson for me also to listen to all these different perspectives that you're sharing. I think if I could have a few minutes to add to it as well, I had a few really interesting points. Get away from the assumptions that roads are only serving cars, right? That we need to serve people, and there are the priorities here. We need to get out of our comfort zone, stop spending, finding the easiest way to spend money on just constructing new roads, but there are definitely newer ways to look at roads in this whole life cycle. We talked about how we need to measure or prove the economic case for good roads that serves all road users. And that goes to better define what success is for sustainable road systems. And that goes back to, redefining the standards for appraisals, to look at different matrices, to get consultations, get the dialogues going, and that seeing roads as public goods that transcends historical and cultural biases or differences, as Rudy has shared. So I found these perspectives, like what I said at the beginning, very complementing to each other, and you're all working from different aspects in roads, and I really appreciate these lessons that you have shared with us today. And again, I think this is just the very beginning of a 3-day discussions that we're having around roads, and you've set the tone very well. We put this session first because we know that at the core of road systems are people, whether they're driving or whether they're using the roads. We're all, used by people. And that's why, we wanted to make sure that our audience, our global audience, are hearing these messages first as they move on to other subjects around asset management, around construction, around the asphalt and around the design. But that they're understanding that this is at the core of the message that we're taking forward, and that's really resonate with the vision of IRF as well. Now, I am very pleased and actually a bit sad because I wish that this is, again, a 3-hour discussion, but unfortunately we're wrapping up our session here. Again, we will be bringing our audience back to the lobby once we end the session, and that the next session will start in about 19 minutes. So on the clock, on 30 minutes to the clock. So if you exit from the lobby, just wait in there, get a cup of coffee or whatever. But do come back for our next session. And in fact, the next session is on safety. Sadly, that we missed the safety angle here, but then it will be discussed in great depth with another great panel of speakers in our next session. So please stay tuned and continue to be with us for the last segment of today's conference. But again, thank you once again to Awa, to Abby, to Rudy, to Bronwyn for spending your time here with us and to sharing your insights with with the IRF community. And with that, we close this session and wish you all a good day in wherever you are. Thank you.